My name is Jamie Patterson, and at 30 years old, I thought I finally understood what family meant. But to explain how I got there, I need to go back to the shadows where the cracks first appeared. I was born into privilege, the eldest daughter of Richard and Eleanor Patterson, who built Boston's largest real estate empire from scratch. On the surface, our life was flawless. A sprawling mansion on 3 acres of Beacon Hill, black tie dinners, polished marble floors that echoed like a cathedral. Outsiders saw us as a success story, the American dream in designer packaging. But inside those perfectly decorated walls, I learned early that love in our house came with conditions, and that I somehow never met them. From my earliest memories, I knew I was second best. My sister Sophia, 2 years younger, was everything my parents valued: graceful, charming, and effortlessly sociable. She seemed born knowing how to glide across a ballroom, how to tilt her head at just the right angle to charm a guest, how to turn the smallest interaction into an alliance. "Jamie, why can't you sit properly like your sister?" my mother would hiss through her painted smile at dinner parties. I would stiffen, cheeks burning, while Eleanor leaned toward our guests, cooing, "Look at how Sophia engages with Mr. Johnson. That's how you build connections." I tried. God knows I tried. I brought home a third-grade report card filled with A's, proud enough to run straight into my father's study where he sat hunched over his computer. "Good job," he muttered without looking up. 3 months later, Sophia brought home B's and C's, and my parents whisked her out for ice cream and a new dress. "She tries so hard," my mother explained, brushing off the disparity. That pattern became the rhythm of my childhood. My achievements absorbed into silence, Sophia's mediocrity, celebrated with gifts and laughter. When I turned 16, I received a plain white envelope with a $50 bill tucked inside. No cake, no party. Just money slipped across the breakfast table. I swallowed the disappointment. But when Sophia's 16th birthday came, the entire circular driveway filled with clapping guests as a gleaming BMW convertible rolled forward wrapped in a giant red bow. "She needs a car," my mother explained smoothly when she caught the devastation in my eyes. "Your sister is more social. You just go to the library anyway." And she was right. I did go to the library. It was the one place I felt like I belonged. Among the shelves, I was no one's disappointment, no one's second choice. Books didn't compare me to my sister. They only asked that I open them. Still, I kept trying to earn what never seemed possible approval. When I graduated valedictorian of my class, I thought maybe finally my parents would beam with pride. They attended the ceremony but slipped out halfway through. "We've already heard your speech in rehearsal," my father said brusquely, "and the Patterson Foundation is presenting a large donation tonight. Priorities." The applause of strangers echoed louder than the absence of my family. In college, the pattern sharpened into something crueler. Despite our wealth, my parents insisted I take out loans and work part-time. "It builds character," my father said. "You need to understand the value of money." Meanwhile, Sophia enrolled at NYU with what the family called her daddy account. Every shopping spree every weekend, getaway to Cancun, every Manhattan apartment rent check. It all flowed from the same endless tap. The imbalance was blatant. When my laptop broke, I saved paychecks for 3 months to afford a replacement. At a family dinner, Sophia casually mentioned needing a new computer for design projects. By the next morning, the latest MacBook was waiting on her desk, custom engraved. "Your sister needs powerful tools," my mother said when I asked why. "She's studying fashion marketing. You just read reports." That was the moment I stopped waiting for fairness. By my senior year, I had accepted the unspoken truth I would never measure up to Sophia in their eyes. And I stopped trying. I poured myself into my studies, earned a full scholarship, and graduated summa cum laude in economics. My parents didn't attend the ceremony, but I didn't care or told myself I didn't. Instead, I rented a small apartment in Cambridge. Every piece of furniture inside it was chosen and paid for by me. A chipped wooden desk, a mismatched couch, thrift store plates. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. For the first time, I felt a flicker of pride, not tied to anyone else's judgment. But pride is a fragile thing when you've grown up starving for love. No matter how much I told myself I didn't need them. Their absence carved deep hollows inside me. Hollows that I tried to fill with independence, achievements, and friendships. Hollows that would ache again the day I fell in love. Looking back now, I see it clearly. The years of favoritism were not just neglect, they were training. My parents had conditioned me to believe I would always be second, always not quite enough. That belief would shape every choice I made, every boundary I failed to set, every tear I swallowed to keep peace. Even as I stood on my own 2 feet, a quiet voice inside whispered, "If they couldn't love you fully, maybe no one will." That voice grew louder the older I became. At family dinners, where I sat silently while relatives praised Sophia's charm. At holidays, where I received perfunctory gifts and Sophia unwrapped Cartier bracelets. At birthdays, where my presence was acknowledged like an afterthought. I told myself I was free of them. I built a life with steady friends, a respected career, a warm little apartment. I smiled at my reflection in the mirror, whispering, "This is enough. This has to be enough." But deep down, I knew better. Family, no matter how toxic, has a way of pulling you back. Sometimes with guilt, sometimes with obligation, and sometimes, when you least expect it, with love disguised as disaster. And mine came on a rainy Tuesday in April, when the burst of a single pipe flooded my apartment and brought a stranger named Jake Wilson to my door. But I'll get to that. For now, all you need to know is this. My parents spent decades teaching me I wasn't worthy. And the cruelest part, for years I believed them. What none of us knew then was that their greatest test of loyalty wasn't behind us. It was waiting in the future, a test that would force me to choose between the family I was born into and the family I would one day build for myself. College was supposed to be my fresh start, the place where I could shed the weight of comparisons and become simply me. But my parents had other plans. Though Richard and Eleanor Patterson owned a company valued at over $200 million, they insisted I take out student loans. "It builds character," my father said, handing me a stack of forms. Without even glancing at the scholarship letter, I waved excitedly in my hand. Sophia, meanwhile, packed for NYU with a fully funded account in her name. "She'll be living in Manhattan," my mother explained matter-of-factly. "Do you know how dangerous it is for a young girl? She'll need money for clothes protection appearances." What about me, I wanted to ask, but I already knew the answer. Cambridge was safe, and I had always been the child expected to manage. So I worked 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore, folding sweatshirts and ringing up textbooks while balancing a full course load in economics. I was exhausted but proud. Every dollar I earned went toward rent, food, and slowly chipping away at the debt my parents had forced me into. Sophia, on the other hand, called me one evening, her voice bubbling with champagne. "Guess where Bradley is taking me for spring break, Cancun. Daddy says I deserve a little sunshine after all my hard work." Her hard work was posting curated photos on Instagram, attending gallery openings, and dropping networking into every other sentence. I bit back my jealousy. Instead, I congratulated her, the phone pressed so tightly against my ear that my knuckles whitened. But my parents' favoritism wasn't just financial, it was woven into the fabric of every conversation. When I came home one weekend to ask for help with a broken laptop, my father didn't even let me finish. "You'll figure it out. Resourcefulness is good for you." Later that same dinner, Sophia sighed dramatically. "Daddy, my computer's been running slow. It's making it impossible to finish my fashion marketing projects." By the next morning, a top-of-the-line MacBook Pro with custom upgrades arrived at her apartment. "Your sister needs the right tools," my mother explained smoothly when I questioned the difference. "She's in a creative field. You just manage numbers." I swallowed my anger. Numbers! That's all I was to them, practical, replaceable, boring. And yet I excelled. By my junior year, I had a perfect GPA. Professors encouraged me to apply for graduate programs. I presented research at conferences, earning nods of respect from strangers who knew nothing of my family name. But the victories always felt muted, as if without my parents' validation, they were somehow smaller. Graduation was the turning point. I walked across the stage, summa cum laude, the applause echoing in the grand auditorium. My parents sat stiffly in the front row, elegant and distracted, checking watches between claps. They left right after I collected my diploma. "The Patterson Foundation has a gala tonight," my father said briskly when I approached. "You understand?" I smiled tightly. Yes, I understood. Their foundation's name mattered more than their daughter's voice. For a moment, as I stood outside the auditorium, clutching my diploma, I felt hollow. But then a different sensation rose in me, a spark of defiance. If they wouldn't celebrate me, then I would celebrate myself. I rented a small apartment in Cambridge, modest, but mine. Second-hand furniture filled the rooms, a couch with slightly frayed cushions, a chipped wooden desk plates, mismatched but colorful. Each item carried the weight of my effort. When I sat at my desk late at night, working on financial reports for my new job at a consulting firm, I felt a strange, quiet pride. For the first time, my life was not a performance for their approval. Still, independence carried loneliness. Sunday dinners dwindled to once a month, then only on major holidays. When relatives asked about me, my mother would smile politely. Jamie is doing fine. She has a steady job. Very responsible. The subtext was always clear, boring, unambitious, disappointing. Meanwhile, Sophia's escapades were the highlight reel. Her internships, boyfriends, trips to Paris, each story punctuated with laughter and applause. Once at Thanksgiving, I overheard my mother whisper to an aunt, "Sophia will marry well. Jamie, she'll be fine on her own, always practical." The words burned. I stabbed at the turkey on my plate, forcing my face to stay neutral. But that night, lying awake in my childhood bedroom, the ceiling above me felt like a lid closing in. I promised myself then I wouldn't let their narrative define me. I didn't need their spotlight. I would carve out my own, even if it glowed dimmer. That promise kept me moving through the next few years. I worked long hours at the firm, slowly climbing from analyst to associate. Colleagues respected me, clients trusted me. I built friendships with people who valued me for my insight, not my family name. And yet sometimes, late at night, when the apartment was quiet and the only sound was the hum of the refrigerator, the loneliness pressed in. I wondered if maybe my parents had been right, that responsibility was all I was and all I'd ever be. It was during one of those quiet nights, as I was reading on my couch while rain pattered against the window, that I heard the first ominous groan from my bathroom pipes. At the time, I thought it was just a household nuisance. I had no idea that the crack of a rusted pipe would open a door not just to water flooding my carpet, but to the one man who would challenge everything I thought I knew about worth, love, and family. Because sometimes the disasters we fear most are the ones that carry the greatest gifts. And that gift would arrive on a Tuesday wearing work boots, carrying a toolbox, and smiling as though the universe had sent him directly to me. But before Jake Wilson knocked on my door, I had to finish learning one last lesson. Standing alone didn't mean I had to stay alone. The storm began at dawn, rattling against the window panes of my Cambridge apartment. By late afternoon, the rain had become relentless, streaking down glass in sheets that blurred the city skyline. I was curled on my couch with a book when I heard a low, hollow groan from the bathroom pipes. At first I ignored it. My building was old. Noises came with the territory. But then came the sharp crack, followed by the unmistakable hiss of water under pressure. I bolted upright. Within seconds, icy water gushed from beneath the sink, soaking the tiles and spreading across the floor like a living thing. My heart hammered as I scrambled for towels, anything to block the flood. But the water was too strong. It seeped into the hallway, darkening the carpet like ink. Hands shaking, I called the emergency number taped to the fridge. "Please," I begged the dispatcher. "It's everywhere. My whole apartment's going to drown." "Someone will be there within the hour," she promised. 53 agonizing minutes later, my doorbell rang. I yanked the door open barefoot and breathless to find a man standing there with a large red toolbox in one hand and calm brown eyes that immediately steadied me. "Hi," he said, his voice warm, threaded with the faintest Boston accent. "I'm Jake. Heard you've got yourself a bit of a water situation." He wasn't what I expected. Jeans, work boots, a navy polo embroidered with Wilson plumbing. His hands were calloused, yes, but clean, and when he smiled, the corners of his eyes crinkled in a way that suggested he laughed often. "Yes, come in, please." I stepped aside, embarrassed by the chaos. Towels were strewn everywhere, my hair plastered damp against my face. Jake crouched by the sink, assessing quickly. "Looks like the joint burst," he murmured. His movements were sure, precise, like someone who not only knew what he was doing, but took pride in it. Within minutes, he shut off the main valve, and the roar of water subsided into silence. I sagged against the doorway, breathing hard. "Crisis contained," he said lightly, wiping his hands. Then his gaze flicked to me, softening. "You okay?" It was such a simple question, but the genuine concern in his tone made my throat tighten. Yes, thank you." He went to work replacing the pipe. Metal clinked, wrenches tightened, and for the first time all day, I felt safe. Curious, I lingered nearby, watching as he worked. His brow furrowed in concentration, lips moving as if he were silently calculating. He wasn't just patching a leak, he was solving a problem piece by piece. So he asked after a while, "What do you do when you're not turning your bathroom into an indoor pool?" Despite myself, I smiled. "I'm a financial consultant." He glanced up, eyebrows raised. "Market trends and all that?" "You know about market trends." Most people's eyes glazed over when I explained my work. Jake chuckled. "Let's just say I've read a bit. Housing bubbles, tech disruption, fascinating stuff." I blinked. A plumber who could casually drop economic jargon. Intriguing. We shifted to books. When I mentioned I'd just finished a thick historical biography, his eyes lit. Wait, you read that too? The one on 19th century industrialists? I stared. You're kidding. Not at all, he said, tightening a bolt. That part about Carnegie's steel monopoly wild. For 3 hours, between fixing pipes and wringing water out of towels, we talked. About literature, history, the oddities of human ambition. His laugh was easy, his insights sharp, and though my apartment still reeked of mildew, I felt strangely alive. When he finished, Jake handed me his card. If you have any more plumbing emergencies or if you just want to continue the conversation about 19th century tycoons, give me a call. The card read Wilson Plumbing, Somerville, MA. Jake Wilson, owner. Owner, not just an employee. I tucked it carefully into my wallet. Thank you, really. Anytime he said and left carrying his toolbox like it weighed nothing. That night, as I mopped up the last puddle, I caught myself smiling at the memory of his eyes crinkling. Call me if you want to continue the conversation. And I realized I wanted to. Our first official date was the following Saturday at a little cafe halfway between our neighborhoods. I told myself it was just coffee casual, no pressure. But when Jake walked in brushing rain from his shoulders, my chest tightened. Jamie, he said, smiling, like he'd been looking forward to this all week. I did something reckless, then I let my guard down. And for 4 hours we talked as if the world outside had paused. About childhood dreams, about books that had changed us, about the kind of lives we wanted to build. There was no pretense with Jake. He wasn't trying to impress me with titles or wealth, only listening, laughing, sharing in a way that felt startlingly genuine. At one point, I caught myself comparing him to my parents. My father always scanning the room for someone more important to talk to. My mother evaluating every gesture for appearances. Jake didn't look past me. He looked at me. When the cafe finally dimmed its lights, signaling closing time, I felt reluctant to leave. Jake walked me to the door. So he said softly, "Think I passed the non-pipe-related conversation test." I laughed, cheeks warming, with flying colors. "Good, because I'd like to see you again." Something inside me, some locked, aching place that had been empty for years, stirred awake. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the water damage in my bathroom, the towels still drying on the rack, the faint smell of damp carpet. Disasters have a way of bringing strangers into your life. Most vanish as quickly as they arrive. But something told me Jake wasn't going to vanish. And I was right. Because what began with a burst pipe would lead to cracks in something far more fragile, the illusion of family loyalty. I didn't know it then, but by letting Jake into my apartment, I had also opened the door to a battle that would test not only my love, but the very meaning of what and who was worth fighting for. I should have known what would happen. The moment I told my parents I wanted to bring someone to family dinner, my mother's tone sharpened. "Oh, someone," she asked lightly, but I could hear the blade beneath the silk. "Yes," I said evenly. "His name is Jake. We've been seeing each other for a few months." There was a pause, long enough for me to imagine her hand tightening around the phone receiver. "How nice," she finally said. "Bring him along. I'm sure your father will be interested." Interested. The word carried the same weight it always had in our family, not curiosity, but judgment. That Saturday evening, Jake and I drove through the iron gates of my parents' Beacon Hill mansion. The driveway curved like a stage, designed for arrivals that would impress. The stone facade loomed above us, lit dramatically by lanterns. For a brief second, I thought about turning the car around. But Jake reached across, squeezing my hand. "Whatever happens in there," he said softly, "it doesn't change us." His calmness steadied me. I nodded and let him lead me inside. The foyer smelled faintly of polish and roses, as immaculate as ever. My mother swept forward in an emerald silk dress, her pearls catching the chandelier light. She kissed my cheek, then turned to Jake with a smile that stopped short of her eyes. "And this must be," she prompted. "Jake Wilson," he said warmly, extending a hand. Her pause was almost imperceptible, but I felt it like a shiver. She shook his hand delicately, as though contact might leave a stain. How interesting. "And how did you two meet?" "A burst pipe," I answered, deliberately steady. Jake came to the rescue. My mother's eyebrows arched a fraction before smoothing. "How fortunate." From the dining room, my father's voice boomed. "Bring them in, Eleanor. Dinner's getting cold." Richard Patterson was already seated at the head of the long mahogany table, a glass of red wine in hand. Sophia sat beside him, luminous, in a dress that looked fresh off a runway with Bradley at her side, handsome, polished, his cufflinks gleaming. Jamie, my father said with brisk acknowledgement. His eyes shifted to Jake. And you are? Jake Wilson, sir. Pleasure to meet you. Wilson. My father's smile didn't reach his eyes. So what do you do, Jake? He said it like a challenge, not a question. I own a plumbing business in Somerville, Jake replied, calm as ever. The smile froze on my father's face. A plumber, he repeated. An entrepreneur, Jake corrected lightly. I took over the business from my father and expanded operations. Bradley chuckled low and condescending. So you fix sinks and toilets. Important work, I suppose. Sophia smirked, sipping her wine. Well, at least you'll never be out of demand. Everyone needs their pipes fixed eventually. Enough, I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. The table went quiet. My parents exchanged a glance, a silent communication I knew all too well. Dinner continued, but the atmosphere was brittle. My father launched into a monologue about real estate acquisitions in the Seaport District, deliberately using jargon heavy enough to exclude Jake. My mother gushed about Sophia's Paris trip, pausing only to ask Bradley about his family's hotel empire. No one asked Jake a single question beyond the obligatory pass the salt. Through it all, Jake remained composed. He listened attentively, complimented my mother's roast lamb, and even attempted a polite question about my father's business. Richard cut him off mid-sentence, redirecting the conversation back to Bradley. By dessert, my jaw ached from clenching. I kept glancing at Jake, half expecting to see frustration or embarrassment. Instead, he looked unruffled, almost amused, as if their barbs bounced harmlessly off him. In the car afterward, I exhaled a storm I hadn't realized I was holding. I'm so sorry, I blurted. They were unbearable. Jake interrupted gently. You never have to apologize for other people's behavior, not even your parents. But he reached for my hand, squeezing. They see me how they want to see me. That has nothing to do with who I actually am. His words settled into me like a stone dropped into deep water, still a knot twisted in my chest. I had seen that look in my mother's eyes when Jake introduced himself, not curiosity, but calculation. I knew that expression. It meant she was already deciding how to dismantle this. And I was right. The very next morning, my phone rang. My mother's voice dripped with feigned sweetness. Darling, you know we want you to be happy. But really? A plumber? What kind of future can he provide? What will we tell our friends? Mom, I said through gritted teeth. Jake is intelligent, kind, hardworking. He owns his business and he makes me happy. That's all that should matter. She sighed dramatically. You've always been stubborn. Just think about what you're doing. You could do so much better. Later that week, my father called. He didn't bother with pleasantries. This is a phase. When you're ready to be serious about your future, let us know. We have associates with sons far more suitable. His words sliced deeper than I admitted aloud. To them, Jake wasn't just unworthy, he was an embarrassment. But there was something else I couldn't shake. During dinner, while my parents ignored Jake, I caught Sophia studying him across the table. Not with the disdain of my parents, but with something sharper curiosity. The way her gaze lingered a beat too long, the way she tilted her head as if trying to decipher him. It was subtle, but I felt it, and it chilled me. Because if my parents' disapproval was predictable, Sophia's attention was dangerous. The invitation came casually, almost like a trap I should have seen. Sophia chirped one evening over the phone. Bradley and I are hosting a weekend at the Cape Cod house. You should bring Jake. It'll be fun family bonding. The words family bonding coming from Sophia's mouth were enough to raise suspicion. Still against my better judgment, I agreed. Some stubborn part of me hoped that if my parents saw Jake in a more relaxed setting, they might soften. I was wrong. The weekend unfolded like a masterclass in exclusion. My mother accidentally set only 5 places at the 6-person table. My father dominated conversations with talk of investment strategies sprinkling in acronyms designed to confuse. Sophia and Bradley launched into debates about which European cities had the best shopping, pausing only to smirk when Jake offered an observation about Boston's local markets. It was endless polite insults wrapped in velvet digs, so carefully worded they could be dismissed as misunderstandings if challenged. That night, walking with Jake along the moonlit beach, I finally broke. I don't know why they can't see how amazing you are, I choked, tears hot against the salty wind. It's like they've decided you're not worthy before even knowing you. Jake pulled me close, brushing damp hair from my face. His expression was calm, but there was something in his voice, a quiet resolve that made me pause. They see me exactly how they want to see me. It has nothing to do with who I actually am. What do you mean? I asked, searching his eyes. He smiled faintly, almost mischievously. When we get back to Boston, I have something to show you. Something I think might surprise you. The way he said it sent a ripple of unease through me. A secret I hated secrets. I'd grown up in a house filled with them, unspoken resentments whispered, deals, lies wrapped in charity smiles. But I trusted Jake, and the following weekend he invited me to his apartment in Somerville. It wasn't lavish, but it was neat, thoughtfully arranged. Bookshelves lined the walls, crammed with volumes ranging from classical literature to engineering journals. A framed photo of an older man, his father, I guessed, sat on the desk. The air smelled faintly of coffee and sawdust, as if the place itself carried both warmth and work. While Jake prepared dinner, I wandered. My eyes landed on a desk covered with sketches, intricate diagrams of pipes, valves, and strange components I didn't recognize. Technical journals were stacked beside them, pages flagged with notes. "Find anything interesting?" Jake's voice came from behind me, carrying a nervous edge I'd never heard before. "These," I said, pointing to the sketches. "They don't look like standard plumbing systems." He set down the 2 glasses of wine he carried, pulling out a chair. "That's because they're not. Sit. There's something I need to tell you." My heart stuttered. His tone was too serious, too deliberate. "I haven't been entirely honest with you," he began. "Or rather, I haven't told you the whole story." I stared, suddenly cold. "Jake, are you married? Hiding a family? Please tell me this isn't—" He shook his head quickly, almost laughing. "No, nothing like that, I promise." He took a deep breath. "I didn't start out as a plumber. I have a degree in electrical engineering from MIT. I worked for 6 years at Talbot Technologies as a senior systems engineer." I blinked, trying to process. MIT systems engineer. "But why are you—" "A plumber," he finished gently. The short version, burnout and purpose. I was designing components for military applications, working 80-hour weeks, feeling like my life meant nothing. When my father got sick 4 years ago, I took leave to help with his plumbing business, and something unexpected happened. His eyes lit with something raw, alive. I loved it. I loved solving real problems for real people. I loved that when I fixed something, I could see the relief on someone's face. So when Dad recovered, I made a choice. I didn't go back. I took over the business. I sank into the chair, dizzy with whiplash. "You're telling me you walked away from a 6-figure engineering career to unclog toilets?" He grinned ruefully. "Not exactly. Plumbing paid the bills, yes. But I never stopped being an engineer. For the past 3 years, I've been developing something those sketches you saw." He handed me a folder. Inside were patents, prototypes, technical specifications for something called the Aqualogic system. "It's a smart water conservation system," he explained. "Reduces household consumption by up to 60% without changing user behavior." I've been testing prototypes in clients' homes, refining as I go. Last month, I secured a patent. 3 venture capital firms are already interested. The words blurred on the page. I looked up, stunned. "Jake, this is revolutionary. Why didn't you tell me?" He reached across this table, taking my hands. "Because I wanted you to fall in love with me, the man who fixes pipes, not the MIT engineer or the potential entrepreneur. And you did. That means everything." Tears stung my eyes. For years, I'd been dismissed as second best because I wasn't glamorous enough, not social enough, not flashy enough. But Jake was telling me that for once, my love wasn't conditional. It wasn't about status or credentials, it was real. But even as my heart swelled, another thought gnawed my parents. If they knew Jake's background, they would twist it into their narrative. They'd claim they were right all along, that he had finally proven himself worthy by being exactly the kind of man they approved of. I didn't want them to have that satisfaction. Neither did Jake. 2 weeks later, he took me to the botanical garden where we'd had one of our earliest dates. Surrounded by spring blooms, he suddenly stopped, turning to me with eyes so earnest my breath caught. "Jamie," he said, dropping to one knee, meeting. "You changed everything. You saw me for who I am, not what I own, not what I studied. You loved me without conditions. I want to spend my life with someone who values kindness over status, love over appearances. Will you marry me?" The ring he held out was simple but beautiful, a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. He had designed it himself, he told me later, and worked with a local jeweler to craft it. "Yes," I whispered, tears spilling down my cheeks. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on my finger and pulled me into his arms. For the first time in my life, I felt chosen, not because of what I could provide, but because of who I was. But beneath the joy was a shadow I couldn't ignore. My parents would never accept Jake for who he was. And the secret of who he really was, an MIT engineer, an inventor, an entrepreneur, would only become another weapon in their arsenal. As Jake kissed me under the blooming magnolias, I felt the weight of a choice pressing down. Keep the secret or reveal it. Protect our love or prove his worth. Either way, war with my family was inevitable, and I had no idea just how ruthless they could be. The morning after Jake proposed, I called my parents, heart-pounding hope flickering like a fragile flame. "Mom," I said brightly when she answered, "I have exciting news. Jake proposed last night, and I said yes." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, her voice returned, cool, distant. "That's quite a surprise. Have you really thought this through?" Not a congratulations, not even a pretense of happiness, just doubt. "Yes, Mom, I've thought it through. I love him, and we want to get married." "Well," she sighed, "I suppose you need to make your own decisions. Your father and I just want what's best for you." Before I could reply, she added almost as an afterthought, "Oh, did Sophia call you Bradley proposed last weekend? They're planning a June wedding at the Fairmont. Isn't that wonderful?" I sat frozen, my sapphire ring catching the light suddenly small against the imagined glare of Sophia's 4-carat diamond. "That's great," I forced out. "You should call your sister," my mother continued. "She's so excited." Bradley gave her the most stunning ring, truly breathtaking. By the time we hung up, what should have been the happiest morning of my life felt hollow. The following weeks only widened the gap. Sophia's engagement was treated like a royal coronation. My parents hosted an extravagant party at the country club, 200 guests, champagne fountains, a string quartet. The Boston society pages ran glossy spreads of Sophia and Bradley, smiling beneath crystal chandeliers. Jake and I, we got nothing. When I asked my mother if they planned anything for us, she smiled thinly. "Well, darling, we thought you might prefer something more low-key, given Jake's situation." Jake's situation, as though his profession was a handicap, a shameful mark to be hidden. "Actually, Mom, a celebration would be nice. Nothing extravagant, just family and close friends." "Of course," she said quickly, patting my hand. "I'll talk to your father." She never brought it up again. Instead, every family dinner became a wedding planning committee for Sophia. Flower arrangements, designer gowns, the guest list for 500 people. I sat silently as they debated string quartets versus 10-piece bands, my own engagement dismissed with distracted nods. "That's nice, dear," my mother would murmur when I mentioned our plans. Then she'd turn back to Sophia. "Now about the bridesmaids' dresses." The most cutting moment came one Sunday evening. My father raised his glass, his voice booming with pride. "I've set aside $300,000 for Sophia's wedding. Only the best for my little girl." I sat frozen, my fork suspended. My parents hadn't offered us a cent, not even an acknowledgement that our wedding existed. Later that night, when I asked about it, my mother's smile was tight. "Well, Jamie, your circumstances are different. Sophia's wedding requires a certain scale." "Scale," I repeated bitterly. "You mean prestige?" Her eyes narrowed. "Don't be dramatic. You've always been more practical. A small garden ceremony will suit you." Her words landed like a slap. Suit you? As if my love, my future, deserved less by default. Even Sophia joined the chorus of dismissal. At her bridal shower, an event more expensive than my entire wedding budget, she twirled her hand so the diamond caught the light. "It's not about money, Jamie," she said sweetly. "It's about marrying someone who can give you the life you deserve." Her meaning was obvious and cruel. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. By June, Sophia's wedding became the event of the year. The rehearsal dinner was held at an exclusive restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor, complete with oysters flown in from France. Guests toasted to Bradley's ambition, his connections, his Harvard MBA. My father's toast still echoes in my mind. "Tomorrow, my beautiful daughter marries the man of her dreams, a man with education, ambition, and the right connections. Bradley, you are exactly the kind of son-in-law we always hoped for." His eyes flicked briefly toward Jake, seated beside me, before returning to the glowing couple. The message was clear. Sophia's marriage was a triumph. Mine was an embarrassment. The wedding itself was spectacle incarnate. Sophia glided down the aisle in a $20,000 gown beneath the vaulted ceilings of Boston's historic Old North Church. 500 guests watched as vows were exchanged, followed by a reception at the Fairmont Hotel, complete with a 5-course meal, 10-piece band, and fireworks over the harbor. Jake remained gracious throughout, offering me quiet squeezes of reassurance as relatives leaned in to ask if he always wanted to be a plumber or if he was planning to do something more ambitious. By the end of the night, my composure cracked. On the drive home, I broke down, sobs tearing from me in waves. "I'm sorry you had to endure that," I choked. "They were horrible." Jake pulled the car over, turning to me with steady eyes. Jamie, listen. I don't care what they think of me. I care that they're hurting you. But us, our wedding. It'll be perfect, not because of money, not because of status, but because it's ours. His conviction steadied me. I nodded, wiping my tears. You're right. I can't wait to marry you, with or without them. 2 weeks later, I called my parents to officially invite them. It's on August 12th at Riverside Gardens. Ceremony starts at 4. My father sighed, papers rustling in the background. August 12th. We have the Children's Hospital Gala that evening. It's been on the calendar for months. The ceremony's at 4, Dad. The gala doesn't start until 7. You could come to both. Another sigh. I'll talk to your mother. He never did. When I called again, my mother made vague excuses about scheduling conflicts. We'll try our best, she said, voice honeyed with insincerity. But I knew, deep down I knew, they wouldn't come. And yet hope is stubborn. On the eve of my wedding, I still found myself dialing her number, desperate for even a sliver of love. Mom, I whispered, voice trembling. It starts tomorrow at 4. Will you and Dad be there? Her pause was brief but final. Oh, Jamie, your father has an important meeting with investors from Dubai. We really cannot miss it. I'm sure your wedding will be lovely, though. It was a lie. There was no meeting, just shame. I hung up numb. My parents had chosen appearances over me. Again. And this time they wouldn't just miss another ceremony. They would miss the moment I finally stepped out of their shadow and into a life where their approval no longer held power. The morning of my wedding dawned clear and bright, as though the sky itself had decided to grant me mercy. Sunlight poured across Riverside Gardens, turning the Charles River into a sheet of molten gold. It should have been perfect. As my best friend Lisa zipped me into my dress, a simple ivory gown with lace tracing the sleeves, I kept glancing at my phone, the front row of empty seats haunting my imagination. I told myself not to hope. I told myself I knew better. But still, some stubborn piece of me whispered, maybe they'll come. Maybe they'll surprise you. At 3:45, with 15 minutes to go, I broke. I dialed my mother's number. She answered on the third ring. Jamie, what is it? We've been through this. Mom, the ceremony starts soon. Please, will you and Dad be here? Her silence was a blade. Then coolly, Jamie, you made your choice to marry him. Enjoy marrying your plumber. We won't be embarrassed with you. Click. The line went dead. For a moment, the world tilted. I sat heavily on the chair, my veil slipping askew, tears rushing down my face. They're not coming, I whispered. Lisa knelt beside me, her hands firm on mine. Then they don't deserve to be here. Today is about you and Jake, no one else. There was a gentle knock. Jamie, it's me. Everything okay? Tradition said the groom shouldn't see the bride before the ceremony. But at that moment, I didn't care about tradition. Come in, I called. Jake stepped inside, looking impossibly handsome in a navy suit. The moment he saw my tears, he dropped to his knees in front of me. What happened? Through sobs, I told him. His jaw tightened, his hand steady on mine. When I finished, he lifted my chin. Jamie, look at me, he said softly. Your parents made their choice, and it's their loss. They will miss seeing their amazing daughter walk down the aisle. They will miss the beginning of our life together. And someday they'll regret it. His certainty anchored me. So the question is, he continued, do you still want to marry me today, with or without them? I swallowed hard, then nodded. Yes, more than anything. He smiled gently. Then let's not give them the power to ruin our day. Something in me snapped free. For years I had lived in the prison of their approval. Today would be my liberation. I dabbed at my eyes, straightened my veil, and rose. Lisa fixed my makeup. I have a wedding to get to. Moments later, another knock came. It was my Uncle Henry, my father's older brother. Unlike Richard, Uncle Henry had always treated me with unconditional warmth. Your father called me, he said quietly. Told me they weren't coming and asked if I'd check on you. I braced for disappointment, but instead, Henry's eyes softened. I told him he was making the biggest mistake of his life. And then I asked myself, would you let me do the honor of walking you down the aisle? Fresh tears, but this time they weren't bitter. I would love that, Uncle Henry. His smile was kind. Your Jake is a good man. Anyone who takes the time to know him can see that. And so, minutes later, I stepped into the sunlight with Henry at my side. The garden was transformed white, fairy lights strung from beams, wildflowers in mason jars, chairs filled with the people who truly mattered. Jake stood at the altar, his expression breaking into awe when he saw me. The absence in the front row no longer mattered. Every vow, every promise we exchanged was raw and real. Jake's voice trembled only once. You loved me for who I was, not what I could prove. I vow to always love you the same way. By the time we kissed, the applause around us was thunderous, not in size, but in sincerity. During the reception, laughter filled the air. Jake's parents embraced me like a daughter. His father, the original founder of Wilson Plumbing, beamed with pride. He's never been happier than he is with you, his mother whispered. Even Lisa gave a toast that had us both in tears. Jamie, you've always been the one who fought hardest for love. Not the shallow kind, but the kind that lasts. And today, you found it. There was no tension, no disapproving glances, no subtle digs, just joy. For the first time in years, I felt light, free. Later, as the sun dipped low and guests danced beneath the fairy lights, Jake pulled me aside. You okay? He asked. I smiled, truly smiled. I'm more than okay. Because though my parents had abandoned me, I had discovered something greater. Family wasn't blood. Family was the people who showed up, who stayed, who celebrated your happiness without condition. Still, a small defiance flickered in me. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a picture taken earlier, Jake laughing with a few old MIT colleagues who'd surprised him by attending. Behind them, a banner read, Congratulations, Jake Wilson, CEO of Aqualogic Systems. Without hesitation, I sent it to both my parents with a single message, Thought you might like a picture from the wedding you missed. Then I turned off my phone, slipped it into my bag, and walked back into the glow of lanterns and laughter. For the first time in my life, I wasn't longing for their approval. I was done. As Jake spun me across the dance floor, his arms strong around me, I realized something I should have known long ago. Freedom doesn't come from earning love that is withheld. It comes from choosing love that is freely given. And tonight I chose. Our honeymoon was the opposite of Sophia's fireworks-filled Fairmont extravaganza, and that was exactly what I wanted. Jake had rented a small cabin on the shores of Lake Champlain, nestled between pines and wildflowers. No photographers, no five-course dinners, no society pages, just us. We hiked during the day, our laughter echoing off the trails. In the evenings, we cooked simple meals, played board games by the fire, and read aloud from books we'd both been meaning to finish. The stillness was a balm I hadn't realized I needed. One afternoon, I sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the lake shimmer under the sun. Jake stepped out, phone in hand, his expression lit with quiet exhilaration. It's official, he said, sliding into the chair beside me. Vertex Capital is investing $5 million into Aqualogic. Full production starts by the end of the year. For a second, I just stared at him, stunned. Then I laughed, throwing my arms around his neck. Jake, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. He hugged me tightly. I couldn't have done it without you. You believed in me before anyone else did. That made all the difference. That evening, news broke in the Boston Business Journal. MIT engineer secures major funding for revolutionary water conservation system. The article detailed Jake's education, his years at Talbot Technologies, the development of Aqualogic. Industry experts hailed it as game-changing the future of residential sustainability. By the time I turned my phone back on, notifications flooded in. 27 missed calls from my parents. 15 text messages, each more frantic than the last. Jamie, call us immediately. We need to talk about Jake. Why didn't you tell us about his background? Please call as soon as you get this. I showed the phone to Jake. He raised an eyebrow, amused. Interesting timing. They ignored our wedding, I said flatly. Now suddenly they're desperate to talk. He shrugged. Their loss. We're on our honeymoon. And so for the rest of the week we ignored them. We kayaked across the lake, shared wine beneath starlight, and let their desperation bounce uselessly against the walls of our peace. But back in Cambridge, reality waited. The Monday after we returned, I switched my phone on to find another wave of messages. This time, my mother's tone was sharper, almost pleading. Darling, we must talk. This is important for the family. Your father insists. Dinner tonight at the Harbor View, 7 p.m. I read it aloud. Jake smirked. They don't waste time, do they? No, I said, bitterness curling in my chest. But we're not going on their turf. Jake nodded. Then let's invite them here. Home field advantage. So that evening, as the clock struck 7, the doorbell rang. My parents stood in the hallway, immaculate as always. My mother clutched a glossy gift bag, my father a bottle of expensive champagne. Jamie, darling, my mother said, sweeping me into a hug that smelled of perfume and desperation. I stepped back, standing deliberately beside Jake. Please come in. They entered our modest apartment, their eyes flicking across the mismatched furniture, the books stacked on every surface. It wasn't Beacon Hill. It wasn't marble and crystal, but it was ours. My mother handed me the bag. A belated wedding present, she said with a brittle smile. We felt terrible about missing the ceremony. I set the bag aside without opening it. Would you like something to drink? We made awkward small talk over glasses of wine. Weather traffic, vague mentions of our honeymoon. Not one word about their absence. Not one word about the cruel call I'd received. Finally, my father cleared his throat. Jake, we owe you an apology. We made assumptions. Jake inclined his head politely but said nothing. His silence made the air heavy. If we had known about your MIT background and your company, my mother began. You would have what I cut in unable to stay quiet. Treated him with basic respect. Attended our wedding. Not been embarrassed by me. Her cheeks flushed. Jamie, we made a mistake. We're trying to make amends. Are you? My voice was sharp now, because it sounds like you're not sorry for how you treated him. You're sorry you underestimated him. Those are very different things. My father straightened his tie, slipping back into his business tone. Regardless, Patterson Property Development could benefit from Aqualogic technology. Perhaps we could discuss a partnership. Jake finally spoke calm but firm. That's interesting, Richard. But I should mention Aqualogic just secured development rights for the Riverfront District project. The color drained from my father's face. The Riverfront District was the crown jewel he'd been chasing for years, worth hundreds of millions. That's unexpected, he managed. I wasn't aware your company had diversified into real estate development. Jake smiled faintly. We're focused on water conservation, but our investors saw Riverfront as the perfect showcase. The deal closed last month. My mother's eyes darted between them, calculating, already spinning a new angle. Well, perhaps that's even more reason for our families to work together. Imagine the synergy. No, I said sharply. Is that why you're here? Because you think Jake can benefit your business? Of course not, my mother protested. We're here because you're our daughter. We want to make things right. You missed our wedding, I said quietly. You called Jake an embarrassment. And now that you know he has the credentials and money you respect, suddenly you care. That's not love. That's opportunism. For once, they had no rehearsed reply. Jake took my hand, his presence steady. This isn't a business negotiation, he said quietly. This is family, and family can't be bought with champagne or partnerships. The silence stretched brittle as glass. Finally, my father stood clearing his throat. We'll give you space, but think about what we said. They left moments later, their perfume and cologne lingering in the apartment like smoke after a fire. I leaned against Jake, my chest tight. Do you think they'll ever change? He kissed the top of my head. Maybe. But whether they do or not, we're building our life. That's what matters. For the first time, I believed him. And yet some instinct deep inside whispered this wasn't over. My parents had spent decades chasing appearances. They wouldn't surrender so easily. What I didn't realize was that the cracks in their empire were already forming cracks that would shatter not just their reputation, but Sophia's perfect facade, too. The following week, my parents invited us again, this time to their Beacon Hill mansion. The pretense was civility, but I knew better. They weren't coming to reconcile. They were coming to negotiate. No, I told Jake firmly when he asked if I wanted to go. Not on their stage. If they want to talk, it'll be here, on our terms. So we set the time. Tuesday at 7. All afternoon, my chest buzzed with nerves. I cleaned the apartment twice, pacing the floor until Jake caught my hand. Relax, he said gently. This is our home. They can't take that from us. The doorbell rang at exactly 7. My parents entered like diplomats arriving at hostile territory, elegant, poised, but with an edge of unease. My mother carried another glossy bag, my father a bottle of Dom Perignon. Jamie, Jake. My mother began with a practiced smile. Thank you for hosting. We thought it only right to bring a little something. I set the bag aside without looking inside. Would you like to sit? The living room felt smaller with them in it. My father settled on the sofa spine, rigid. My mother perched beside him like a queen, awaiting petitioners. Jake and I sat across from them, hands clasped on the armrest between us. Small talk bled into silence. At last my father cleared his throat. Jake, as I mentioned before, we owe you an apology. We misjudged you. That was wrong. Was it? I asked before Jake could answer. Or did you misjudge his bank account? Jamie, my mother said, her smile tightening. Don't be cruel. We're trying to make amends. I laughed bitterly. Amens. You called me stubborn. You told me I could do better. You refused to attend our wedding because you were embarrassed. And now that you've discovered Jake's an MIT engineer with investors lining up, suddenly you care. That's not remorse. That's strategy. For once, Eleanor faltered. We only wanted the best for you. No, I said coldly. You wanted the best for your image, for your social standing. You never asked what I wanted. My father straightened, slipping into the tone he used in boardrooms. Regardless of past mistakes, I think there's a way forward. Patterson Property Development is exploring eco-friendly projects. Aqualogic's technology could be an excellent partnership opportunity. Jake's face remained calm, but his eyes sharpened. Interesting, he said evenly. But you should know Aqualogic already secured the Riverfront District project. Richard's expression froze. Color drained from his cheeks. The riverfront. Jake nodded. We closed the deal last month. Our investors wanted a flagship development, and Riverfront was perfect. The silence that followed was seismic. My father's empire had chased the Riverfront district for years. To lose it, not to a competitor, but to his son-in-law, was a humiliation he hadn't prepared for. His voice cracked before he regained control. That project represents hundreds of millions. Jake cut him off gently. Yes, and it will also showcase how water conservation can reshape urban living. That's why it was ideal for us. My mother's eyes darted between them, calculating furiously. Well, perhaps that's all the more reason for collaboration. Imagine Patterson Property Development and Aqualogic united. No, I said flatly. Her head whipped toward me. No. That's not why you're here. You're not here because you regret missing my wedding. You're not here because you suddenly love Jake. You're here because you want a piece of what he built. Jamie, my father snapped. You're being emotional. I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. Emotional. Do you know what it felt like to sit in my wedding dress and beg my own mother to come, only to hear her say, "Enjoy marrying your plumber"? That wasn't emotion, Dad. That was survival. That was me finally realizing you'll never value me unless I come packaged with status and wealth. My mother's eyes glistened, though I couldn't tell if the tears were real or tactical. Jamie, please. We made a mistake. But surely you don't mean to cut us out entirely. We're family. Family, I whispered. Family shows up. Family loves unconditionally. You've never been that. The silence stretched. Then Jake spoke, his voice low but firm. This isn't a business negotiation, Richard. You can't buy your way back in with champagne and promises. If you want a relationship with Jamie, you'll have to earn it. For the first time in my life, my parents looked small. Their power, their elegance, their wealth, it all seemed fragile like glass, ready to crack. My father cleared his throat, retreating behind formality. Very well, we'll give you space. They rose, gathering their untouched gifts. My mother's voice trembled as she said, We do love you, Jamie. We just lost sight of what mattered. I didn't answer. I opened the door, letting them out into the night. When the latch clicked shut, I sagged against it, every muscle trembling. Jake pulled me into his arms. You were incredible, he whispered. I don't feel incredible, I admitted. I feel exhausted. Exhausted, yes. But free, he murmured, kissing my temple. You finally stood up to them. You finally told them the truth. And he was right. For the first time in my life, I wasn't seeking their approval. I wasn't begging for scraps of affection. I had drawn a line they couldn't cross. Still, as I lay in bed that night, a hollow ache remained. No matter how much I pretended, part of me still longed for the parents I'd never had. But something else stirred too, a quiet certainty that the story wasn't over. My parents had built their empire on appearances, and appearances have a way of collapsing when truth claws its way out. And when it did, I wouldn't be the one left in ruins. It began with a midnight phone call. Jamie Sophia's voice cracked through the line, trembling. I need your help. I sat up in bed, instantly alert. What happened? It's Bradley, she whispered, sobbing. The FBI raided our apartment. He's been running some kind of Ponzi scheme through his family's hotels. They took everything. He's going to prison. For a moment, the silence between us was heavy with irony. Bradley, the golden son-in-law, the one my parents toasted as their dream. Fraud, lies, scandal. Where are you now? I asked quietly. At a friend's. I only have 2 suitcases. Her voice broke. Would you really let me stay with you after how I treated you and Jake? I closed my eyes. I thought of every smirk, every insult, but I also thought of the fear in her voice. Of course, I said. That's what family does. The next morning, Sophia stood in my doorway, her eyes swollen, her clothes wrinkled, dragging luggage that looked pitiful compared to the designer bags she once flaunted. Jake carried her bags inside without a word, offering her tea like she was any other guest. Our parents, meanwhile, distanced themselves with surgical precision. In public, they released statements condemning Bradley, insisting Sophia was a victim. In private, they scolded her. You should have known, my father barked during one phone call I overheard. We can't be associated with this mess. But Sophia's mess wasn't the only one. Investigators soon discovered that Richard and Eleanor Patterson had been entangled in some of Bradley's schemes. Maybe they hadn't known, maybe they'd turned a blind eye, but either way, questions mounted. Business associates backed away. Investors withdrew. By the end of the year, my parents were forced to sell the Beacon Hill mansion, the fortress of perfection they'd hidden behind for decades. I visited once before the sale, standing in the grand foyer where I'd spent my childhood. The marble still gleamed, but the air felt hollow, brittle. My mother trailed behind me, her composure fractured. All those years, she murmured almost to herself, we thought status would protect us. Her voice trembled in a way I'd never heard. For the first time, Eleanor Patterson sounded human. Sophia, meanwhile, was learning a new life under my roof. She found a modest job in marketing, commuted by bus, and slowly rebuilt. One night over dinner, she stared at Jake and me as we laughed about something trivial. You're actually happy, she said, astonished. Not just Instagram happy, real happy. I smiled gently, because we built it on respect, not appearances. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know that was possible. Months passed. Slowly, my parents re-emerged, stripped of their empire, living in a downsized home. Their names whispered in Boston society with pity rather than envy. Then, one afternoon, my father called. Jamie, he said, his voice gravelly, your mother and we'd like to visit, if you'll allow it. I hesitated, but curiosity and some stubborn remnant of longing made me agree. When they arrived, I hardly recognized them. My father looked smaller, his posture bent. My mother's elegance was cracked, her pearls missing her eyes, ringed with fatigue. We've been doing a lot of thinking, my father began once we sat in the living room. About values, about what really matters. And we were wrong. My mother nodded, her voice breaking. The people we thought were our friends disappeared when we needed them. But you took in Sophia. You showed what family really means. For once, there was no performance, just regret. I listened in silence, Jake's hand steady in mine. We don't expect forgiveness, my father said, his voice rough. We just want a chance to do better, to be the parents you deserved. I exhaled slowly. I can't promise things will ever be the same. The old normal wasn't healthy, but maybe we can build something new. And so we tried. It wasn't easy. Old patterns surfaced, words slipped, pride flared. But there were also moments, small startling moments of honesty. My mother crying openly when Jake explained his invention, my father apologizing without conditions after a sharp comment. Change, real change, is slow, but for the first time it felt possible. 2 years after our wedding, Jake and I sat in a doctor's office staring at the grainy ultrasound image of our first child. Joy surged through me like sunlight breaking clouds. When we told my parents, my mother's tears were unforced. We want to be the kind of grandparents who accept and love unconditionally, she said. The kind we should have been as parents. I believed her, tentatively. Jake and I created a scholarship fund at MIT for students from working-class families who dreamed of engineering. We named it after his father, the man who taught Jake that honest work, any work, carries dignity. Sophia started a nonprofit to help women rebuild after financial abuse. Watching her find purpose filled me with a pride I hadn't felt since we were children. And my parents. They scaled down their company, focusing on affordable housing projects instead of luxury towers. Slowly, painfully, they were learning. Looking back, I realized something startling. Their rejection, as cruel as it was, freed me. If they had embraced Jake from the beginning, I might never have broken from their grip. I might never have learned that my worth wasn't something they could give or take away. I built my life not on their conditions, but on my own values. Love over status, respect over appearances. And in the end, even they had to learn those values from me. Sometimes the family you're born into wounds you deepest. Sometimes it takes building your own through choice, through resilience, through love to heal. And sometimes against all odds, even the old family can be remade. If you've ever been dismissed, undervalued, or told your choices made you less, remember this: your worth was never theirs to measure. It was always yours to claim.